Hello, my friends. If you are in a neuroplastic process of recovery, I want you to know this. Doing it is the win. The practice, the incremental training, the scary thing, whatever it is, no matter what the outcome. There's a few caveats to this, but that's the general principle. Doing it is the win. Not how you feel during or afterwards. Now, the two caveats or conditions for this are that you follow through with the process of neuroplasticity. I will explain what that means in a second, and that you learn from it. So the common areas I see this in coaching, the feedback I get is, well, I was feeling really bad. I did a practice and then, I felt maybe a little more stable, or maybe I didn't feel better at all. It didn't change how I felt. I still felt bad. Or I did an incremental training. I went and I took a walk. I, hung out with a friend. I went to the grocery store. I, biked for 5 minutes or sat for 5 minutes or whatever it was. And I had symptoms still. I did it. And usually this is in the context of at the beginning of their practice, they couldn't do it and now they're doing it, but I still had symptoms during and after. And there's often a feeling of like, does it count if I still had symptoms? Yes, it counts. Yes, it counts. Especially if you couldn't do before, it counts. So the second bit being that if you follow through. Now, understand that in this process, consistency is really key. And especially when we're incrementally training, and that is doing anything that has been otherwise unavailable to us. And that includes things like achieving calm. I know I talk about training on calm a lot here. So achieving greater states of calm or joy, especially if that has felt really uncomfortable or unavailable, that counts as an incremental training. Or it could be something more typical like eating something or being around certain scents or doing certain activities. And in this process, if you do the thing and you have symptoms during, the point of it is to use your practice. So whatever your tools are, laughter, visualization, somatics, breathing, tapping, humming, singing, dancing, laughing, whatever your things are. And generally most, programs, it's like visualization around is like a typical thing you do before and after an exposure. But the understanding is that when you do something that has been challenging or triggering in the past, for the first dozen to 50 or more times, your brain is still going to respond with the pathways that are currently active, which are cross-wired and involving activation and symptoms. So you can expect that you're going to have activation and symptoms the first, number of times you train on something. And the key with the following through is that you then build self-trust by saying, no, I can stabilize myself with my tools and create enough dose and stability in my nervous system to be able to tolerate the symptoms and not spin out in a fear loop or feelings of despair or feelings of failure or fear or whatever it is. Now that's the caveat. If we go do a thing, but then, or even a practice, and then we don't feel better or we feel bad, and then we spin out about it, that's going to reinforce the loop. But if you go do a thing that you used to have symptoms around, you have symptoms, you come home, you have symptoms, and they're there, they're really there. But you do a practice and you're committed to bringing yourself back down to or toward your new baseline of something closer to calm. Doesn't have to be completely calm or completely happy, but to a place where you're no longer believing the false messages. Your head's not stuck in the symptom monster where you're like out of touch with reality anymore. You're like, okay, it's breathing down my neck, but I'm not inside of it. Okay, that's a win. That's the win. You're building trust. You're showing yourself you can do something scary and uncomfortable and help yourself to come back to a place of reality and calm and groundedness afterwards, even if it still feels a bit fragile. That's the point. That's the progress. That's the rewiring, is that you bring yourself back. And the last bit of learning is really key too, because sometimes we'll do something and we won't be able to get ourselves back. That's a sign that you're outside your training zone, most likely. The other bit is, again, if you're using tools consistently and they're not, so, if you did it, that was the win. If you're doing visualization, you're doing whatever practices you're doing, if you're doing them consistently, but you're not noticing any change. You're like, okay, I'm doing it. But it's just kind of like you're knocking on a brick wall and you're like, is this a door or not? I don't know. That's the point where we want to observe and notice how our system's responding, if we might need a different approach or more information, how to apply the tools, different tools, whatever it is. That's where you want to seek more information. And part of learning too is noticing what your system responds best to. Noticing like what works best for me when I'm really amped up in fight flight, when I'm really anxious, when I'm really spinny, when I'm really ruminating, when my heartbeat is going and I'm having a panic attack or whatever, that really up state, versus what works for me when I'm more in freeze and shut down. Observe, keep track, notice what your system responds to, notice the patterns. Pattern recognition is huge here. Everybody's system has certain things that they're gonna respond better to. And you'll notice the patterns of what actually helps you to feel more regulated over time. So pay attention to how you feel and notice specifics. So one example for this for me was there was a period in my recovery where I did rounds. I did my full hour of rounds every day and it didn't really feel like it was doing anything. Like my analogy was it felt like a handshake. Like emotionally, it felt totally bland, like very neutral, like nothing was really happening. There was nothing. And so I was like, oh, this isn't working. I don't need to do this an hour a day. So I dropped them off and I was doing like a half an hour or 20 minutes a day because it just didn't seem like it was helping. And then I noticed I was like really getting lost in my thought patterns and obsessive patterns and obsession about symptoms and feel like I was getting lost in the pops. I was getting lost in the sauce the rest of the day. So I was like, okay, let me bring the rounds back in. And maybe they were helping. And once I got back to an hour a day, I was like, oh, I can actually access my prefrontal cortex the rest of the day when I do a full hour of rounds, even when they feel like nothing. And that was a huge realization for me. And it may not be the same for you. This is just an example. So, and again, things like music worked really well for me, but you want to focus on what works for you. So try different things and try them consistently. We've got to be consistent enough to be able to get an understanding of what's going on. Generally for trial and error, I recommend 3 to 4 days to a week of trying something to see if you look back over the course of the week, it's like, was my mood a little bit better? Was it a little easier for me to notice negative, trauma loops and catch them? Was it easier for me to redirect? Did I feel like I had a bit more stability under me, even though the activation felt like the same? It's like your baseline is a little higher. So the activation's going, but when your baseline's down here, it's like all of you's kind of in it. When your baseline rises, it just doesn't rock you as much. Your output, your day-to-day activity level can stay more consistent. And that's progress, even if the symptoms, the discomfort, and the activation levels feel about the same to you emotionally. So keep track, learn, study yourself, study your brain and nervous system. So if you did it, you win. Focus more on the process, on your own achievements, your own efforts that you put in. This process is building you and it's shaping you. So focus much more on what you're doing than on what your brain is doing or how it's responding to what you're doing. That's the part that matters the least. Love you guys.